The light died with the final click of the principal's office lock. That last metallic snap echoed down the dark hallway of Pineville High like a mercy shot. Shit. We were locked in. For real. This wasn't the stupid adventure Peter, Kate, Luke, and I, Tyler, had planned to escape the monotony of our small town. We wanted a thrill, a gut-chilling story to tell on Monday. We got it. Only the thrill was ice in our veins, the chill was deadly, and the story, if we survived to tell it, no one would believe. Or worse, they would, and it would be too late. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It was a living substance, thick, seeping into my nostrils along with the stale scent of chalk, peeling paint, and something else. Something damp and faintly sweet, like mold on spoiled cotton candy. The high, narrow corridor windows admitted only slivers of moonlight, turning rows of lockers into crouching shadows ready to pounce. Kate, always the most grounded, pulled out her phone. The screen lit her pale face, eyes wide. No signal. Luke tried his, then Peter, then me. All dead. The power had cut out suddenly, right after the janitor, old Mr. Henderson, had locked the front door without seeing us hidden in the supply closet, waiting for the school to empty for our nighttime exploration. Now, that utter darkness and silence, broken only by our ragged breathing and a high-pitched whine seeming to come from the walls themselves, was a prison of cinder blocks and terror. It was Peter, of course, who planted the idea. Peter, with his challenging grin and a courage bordering on stupidity. "Being locked in sucks, man," he whispered, his voice unervingly loud in the vacuum. "But we're here. Remember that story? The lady of the back bathroom." Luke swallowed hard. We all remembered. A rotten urban legend, as old as the school itself. They said a student, decades ago, hanged herself in the last stall of the girls' bathroom down in the abandoned East Wing. The place even teachers avoided because of the constant smell of leaks and an inexplicable cold spot. They said if you called to her at midnight, with a lit candle and her real name, Alzira, she would answer. And if she answered, well, no one agreed on what happened next. Only that it was bad. Very bad. Kate protested, logic and fear warring in her voice. "That's insane, Peter. Scared kid nonsense. Besides, the girls' bathroom? Let's just stay here, wait for someone to come back, for Mr. Henderson to do his rounds." But fear and boredom breed desperation, and desperation is fertile ground for madness. A coldness not from the AC, shut off, began creeping into our bones. The shadows seemed to breathe. The whine in the walls intensified, whispering indistinct promises. We needed action, any action, to deny the helplessness swallowing us whole. We found a stub of an emergency candle in the teacher's lounge closet, half melted, smelling of old wax. Peter's lighter spat a yellow flame that danced wildly, throwing our grotesque silhouettes onto the high ceiling. The tiny light was pathetic comfort, but it was all we had. We moved in single file, shoulder to shoulder, stepping lightly as if the floor might give way, towards the east wing. Each footstep echoed like a hammer blow. The smell changed as we advanced. The sweet mildew gave way to a sharp, acidic odor, cheap cleaning chemicals mixed with something indefinably organic and decaying. The cold intensified, a biting frost gnawing at exposed skin, emanating from the end of the hallway where the girls' bathroom door rested, slightly ajar. The bathroom was a tomb of white tiles stained yellow and green. Our weak candlelight didn't reach the corners, leaving the stalls as black graves. The smell was unbearable now. Chlorine, ancient vomit, and meat left in the sun. The air was so frigid our breath formed white ghosts that dissolved too quickly. The end stall, as in the legend, seemed to draw in the feeble candlelight, sucking it into its denser darkness. Peter, his face a mask of cold sweat and forced determination, raised the candle. Alzira. His voice cracked on the name, turning it into a growl. Nothing. only the slow drip of a faulty faucet somewhere, echoing like heartbeats in the oppressive silence. Relief washed over us, warm and sickly. Nonsense. All nonsense. Then, the candle went out. Not from a draft. Not from a breath. The flame simply ceased to exist, as if it had never been, plunging us into a darkness so absolute it felt physical, pressing against my eyeballs. The dripping stopped. The whine in the walls ceased. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream. It was the silence of something focusing, paying attention. My skin crawled, every hair standing on end like a sensor detecting an immense, ancient, and profoundly wrong presence filling the small bathroom space, emanating from the end stall. Something moved inside. Not a step, but a wet, heavy dragging, like a swollen, formless body peeling itself off the toilet or the wall. A new smell overpowered all others, the nauseating stench of stagnant, brackish water, of algae decomposing in a pond under a blazing sun. It came mixed with a damp cold that penetrated my bones. Luke let out a low whimper, an animal sound of pure terror. Kate began trembling uncontrollably beside me. Peter emitted a choked grunt. The darkness was no longer passive. It pulsed. It breathed. And it was coming towards us. We ran. We didn't think, just reacted to the primal flight instinct screaming in every fiber. We piled up in the narrow doorway, slippery hands banging on the cold metal. The hallway, once merely dark, now seemed alive. Shadows writhed at the edges of my vision, taking on fleeting, grotesque shapes, fingers too long, mouths torn wide, silhouettes stretching beyond possibility. The smell of rotting water pursued us, a fetid mist burning our throats. The wet dragging sound came from behind, slow, deliberate, impossibly faster than our desperate sprint. It wasn't footsteps. It was the sound of something large and viscous being hauled across the tiled floor. The front door, our only hope, was one corridor away. It felt like miles. My legs burned. My heart hammered in my temples like a trapped bird. Luke stumbled ahead of me, falling to his knees with a dull thud. Before I could react, a scream tore through the darkness. Not a scream of pain, but of absolute terror that froze the blood in my veins. It was short, muffled, as if something had instantly covered his mouth, replacing the sound with a horrible, wet, grinding noise, followed by a sudden, heavier silence. "Luke!" Kate shrieked, her voice a thread of despair. No answer. Only the wet dragging resuming. Closer now, much closer. The smell was suffocating. Peter, further ahead, had vanished into the gloom. I grabbed Kate's arm, yanking her with a strength I didn't know I possessed. We didn't look back. We couldn't. The sound of whatever took Luke, that wet, grinding noise, echoed in my ears, mingling with my own panic. The main door loomed ahead, a rectangle of imposing metal under the weak moonlight filtering through the high glass transom. Peter was already there, pounding frantically on the heavy wood, screaming for help that wouldn't come. The keys were with Mr. Henderson, somewhere in the outside world, distant as another planet. The wet dragging sounded right behind us, filling the corridor. The smell was unbearable, making our eyes water. Kate choked back a sob. I turned, pressing my back against the icy door, forcing my eyes to pierce the gloom. It came. Not a woman. Not a ghost. It was an indistinct mass, blacker than the surrounding darkness, reflecting faint moonlight like slug skin. It moved with a slow, repulsive undulation, leaving a glistening wet trail on the floor. No eyes, but I felt its gaze, a physical weight crushing me, filled with an ancient hunger and icy malice. Within that pulsating black mass, pale, disjointed things seemed to writhe. Fragments of bone? Shreds of cloth? Luke's arm. My mind refused to complete the picture. The mouth. If it was a mouth, was merely a deeper tear in the blackness, a void sucking the light and warmth from the air. Peter, maddened by terror, stepped forward towards the thing. "Go away!" he screamed, his voice shrill, defiant, but shattered by dread. The mass pulsed. The dark tear that was its mouth widened slightly. There was no sound, but unbearable pressure exploded inside my skull, as if my brain were being squeezed. Horrific, fragmented images flooded my mind. Black water rising, cold hands grabbing ankles, the taste of silt in my mouth, the suffocating despair of drowning in something that wasn't water. It was Alzira's death, not suicide. Drowning. Something had pulled her down, filled her, turned her into this. And now it wanted company. More souls trapped in the rotten bathroom for all eternity. Peter froze, a thread of saliva trailing from the corner of his mouth, eyes glazed and empty. The thing extended a black, glistening pseudopod towards him, slow, inevitable. Kate let out a shattering scream. It saved me. The sound broke the spell of horror holding me. With supernatural strength born of pure instinct, I threw myself against the door, no longer trying to open it, but trying to smash the small, high window with my elbow. Glass shattered. Blood ran down my arm, warm against the deathly cold. I didn't think. I shoved my hand through, feeling shards cut my skin, frantically searching for the outside handle. My hand found cold metal. I twisted. With a protesting shriek of rusted metal, the door swung outward. I hauled Kate, who was paralyzed watching Peter being slowly enveloped by that living, wet darkness. He didn't struggle, just mumbled, his eyes reflecting the absolute nothingness consuming him. We stumbled out into the damp night air of Pineville, the fresh air a stab to the lungs after that stench. We didn't look back. We ran down the deserted street, our ragged shouts tearing the night silence. Police came. Firefighters. Mr. Henderson, pale and confused. They searched the school. They found Luke in the hallway, near the bathroom. His body. I won't describe it. I can't. Just say it looked crushed, as if forced through a tight pipe lined with blades. Of Peter, no sign. No trace. Only a wet, black, glistening stain on the floor of the East Wing girls' bathroom that evaporated before anyone could collect a sample, leaving only a sweet, rotten smell hanging in the air. They said it was an accident. That Luke fell, had an aneurysm, something like that. That Peter ran off, scared by what he saw. Comfortable lies to cover a horror that can't be understood. But I know. Kate knows. Every night, when the darkness gets too quiet, when the mildew smell in my house seems a little too sweet, I hear it. It's low, almost imperceptible, coming from the shower drain, the pipe under the sink, anywhere with standing water and darkness. It's a wet, dragging sound. And whispers. Overlapping voices, drowned voices, calling. Calling for company. Calling for Alzira. Calling for me. They're down there. Trapped. And the bathroom in Pineville High's East Wing isn't the only locked door holding the horror anymore. The horror spreads. Through the pipes. Through the darkness. Through water we can no longer trust. They're always hungry. And always searching. The asphalt of Route 666 cutting through the Pine Barrens that night wasn't just dark. It was a dead tongue swallowed by New Jersey fog, a cold breath of the earth shrouding the woods like a burial cloth. I, Jake, clenched the wheel of my old Grand Marquis until my knuckles screamed. The country radio a flimsy shield against the crushing silence that had settled since the last ghost town gas station. Mike dozed beside me, head thumping the window, breathing heavy. In the back seat, my sister Sarah stared into the white wall beyond the windshield, eyes wide, catching hollow reflections of headlights in the ink. She'd mentioned hours ago that this stretch gave her the creeps, but any lightness had died with the sun. Only the engines grumble, the radios hiss into emptiness, and the gut-deep knowledge that we were on the devil's highway remained. Famous not for ordinary wrecks, but the unexplained ones. Cars found empty, engines still ticking. Weird marks scorched into the blacktop. Whispers at truck stops about hitchhikers best left unacknowledged. Mike jerked awake when the car jolted over a pothole. He asked if I was sleeping, rubbing his eyes as he peered into the solid wall of fog, demanding to know where we were. I didn't know. Streetlights were distant ghosts consumed by the milky white. Sarah's GPS had flashed no signal for miles. It was just us, the Grand Marquis, and the road snaking through a world shrunk to the yellow cone of our headlights. A loneliness heavy as a wet blanket. Sarah leaned forward, asking if we remembered the story of the woman at Dead Man's Curve. Mike dismissed it impatiently, but I remembered. A woman in white, they said, appeared on nights thick with fog like this, near where a school bus had plunged off the road decades back. If you saw her, you didn't stop. Didn't even look. Stopping meant nightmare. Sarah pressed, her voice thinning, arguing the air felt wrong, that this fog was different. She didn't finish. Fear was a metallic taste in the damp air. That's when I saw it. A pale smudge at the roadside, to the right, just beyond the headlights' reach. A figure. Tall. Slender. Motionless. Wearing something light, maybe white, seeming to float in the stagnant fog. A curse escaped me. Mike followed my gaze, asking what it was. He didn't see yet. I pointed with trembling fingers. The Grand Marquis passed like a slow ship. For a split second, the headlights washed over her. Not an illusion. A woman. Dark hair, long, wet, plastered to a face pale as curdled milk. A simple white dress, soaked, clinging to a skeletal frame. And the face. God, the face. Empty. Eyes like dark craters, deep, lifeless, fixed on some distant point down the road, or maybe nothing at all. She didn't thumb a ride, didn't gesture, just stood there, planted on the edge of the black asphalt, a macabre statue born of the mist. My heart leapt into my throat. I yelled at Mike not to look, but it was too late. He looked, and froze. Sarah begged in a terrified whisper for me to speed up, to get us past. I blinked, trying to erase the image, but when I opened my eyes, she was still there, shrinking in the rear view. Still. Always still. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. I muttered mostly to myself that it was probably just some woman with car trouble, but the logic rang hollow. Who would stand like that on this stretch on this night? The radio suddenly spat a sharp crackle, pure static for an instant, then silence returned. The air inside the car turned icy, a damp cold not coming from outside. Mike asked if I'd turned on the AC, rubbing his arms. I hadn't. Sarah sobbed softly behind me, murmuring that the woman hadn't been looking at us, but through us. My rational mind fought. Lost person, in shock. Sick joke. But instinct, cold and primal, screamed something else. Something profoundly wrong. I kept the speed steady, eyes glued to the road, forcing myself not to check the mirrors. Mike couldn't turn away. He asked if she was still there, his voice hoarse. I looked. The rear view showed only fog swallowing the road behind. I lied, saying she was gone. The relief was fleeting. Minutes later, around another bend, there she was. Again. On the left this time. Same stance. Soaked white dress. Pale, empty face. Black hair. Abyssal eyes. Phil. Waiting. Or appearing. Mike groaned that it couldn't be, that we'd driven miles. Impossible. Physically. Unless. The cold deepened. My hands on the wheel went numb. The fog seemed thicker, cloying. The Grand Marquis's engine coughed raggedly before catching. I accelerated. 80, 90, 100 kilometers per hour. The big car shuddered. The road was a tunnel of fog. Sarah screamed for me to slow down, clutching her seat. But I couldn't stop. Couldn't slow down. Had to leave it behind. We passed her again, a phantom shape swallowed by the white wall. This time, in the mirror, I saw. She wasn't still anymore. She was closer to the lane, almost on it. And her head, previously facing forward, was slightly turned towards our car. The black holes seemed to pierce the distance, fixed on me. I yelled that she'd seen us, that she knew, panic taking hold. The next curve. And there she was. Not at the edge. Not static. She was in the middle of our lane. Standing. Immobile. White dress glowing wickedly in the headlights. Corpse face aimed right at us. Arms stiff, hands open, palms upturned, like a gesture of morbid welcome, or waiting to receive an offering. I slammed the brakes. The Grand Marquis shrieked, skidding on the wet asphalt. Sarah screamed. Mike's head cracked against the dashboard. We stopped yards from her. Fog swirled around her like part of her shroud. The engine died. Absolute, oppressive silence fell. Only the dashboard clock's ticking echoed like a frantic heartbeat. She didn't move. Just stood there, blocking the way, empty eyes drinking the headlight beams. The air inside was freezing. I could see my breath. Fear was a live thing writhing in my chest. Mike pleaded in a shaky whisper for me to reverse, to drive around her. I tried. Turned the key. The engine groaned in agony, wouldn't catch. Nothing. She lifted her head, a jerky, inhuman motion. Her neck cracked. Then she started to walk. Not towards the car. Not away. She walked around the Grand Marquis. Slow, dragging steps, silent on the wet road. The white dress didn't sway. Rigid. Frozen. She passed in front, those black eyes sweeping across the windshield, passing over me like I was glass. She went to Mike's side. He shrank back. Sarah begged us not to look at her. The figure passed his window, shadow darkening the glass. Stopped. Turned her head. Looked directly inside. At Mike. He let out a choked whimper, an animal sound of pure terror. Eyes wide, fixed on her, glazed. He didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Paralyzed. She continued her slow, dragging circuit around the car. Past the rear. I stared frantically into the rear view. Only fog. Where was she? The silence was deafening. The clock's tick hammered. Suddenly, a dull thud on the roof. Like something heavy and wet had dropped onto the car. Sarah screamed. Muffled. Another thud. Closer to my side. Something was on the roof. Crawling. Dragging itself. We felt the weight shifting over the sheet metal. The sound of something sharp and hard scraping metal. A wet, repulsive dragging. The fog pressed in, suffocating. The smell changed. Nauseating stench of wet cemetery earth, meat rotting in stagnant water. The weight slid onto the hood. Before my eyes, a hand appeared at the edge of the windshield. Not human. Pale, fingers too long, thin as bones, ending in black, broken nails. It gripped the windshield seal. Another hand appeared. Slowly, the head rose into view over the hood. It wasn't the woman in white anymore. Or it was, but transfigured. Face swollen, distorted. Skin stretched and translucent like a waterlogged corpse. Black eyes were burst blisters, leaking dark fluid. Hair was a mass of black, rotting seaweed, dripping filthy water onto the hood. The mouth opened in a lipless gash, revealing rows of small, sharp teeth, dark as charred bone. No sound, but immense pressure, a presence of pure hatred and ancient hunger, crushed my chest. It stared fixedly at me. Only at me. The engine, suddenly, roared to life. Instinct overrode terror. I stomped the gas. The Grand Marquis lurched forward. The creature on the hood slipped, vanishing from sight with the heavy thud of something wet hitting asphalt. I didn't look back. I accelerated like a madman, the fog tearing open before me. Mike was curled in his corner, staring at his hands, trembling uncontrollably. Sarah sobbed. Mike mumbled, unfocused, that she had spoken to him, whispered inside his head, said he was already marked, that she was coming for what was hers. We didn't stop until the weak glow of an abandoned, barely functioning gas station hours later. The Grand Marquis was coated in sticky, greenish-black sludge, reeking of swamp. Mike was mute, just shaking. Sarah cried silently. We reached Pineville under a shroud of leaden silence. Mike went straight to the hospital, in shock. They said PTSD. Medicated him. Didn't help. He locked himself in his room, saying he saw the white shape in corners, heard dragging footsteps in the hall, felt her cold approach. A week later, they found him, hanged with his bedsheets. The doctor called it psychosis. Sarah and I know. He tried to run. Run from the thing that whispered inside him and marked him. The woman at Dead Man's Curve. The thing in the fog. Whatever she is. Sarah moved away, to the coast. Says the sound of the ocean drowns out the whispers she still hears on damp nights. I still drive. Have to live. But I never set foot on Route 666 at night again. I avoid fog like the plague. And always when I travel deserted roads, especially on cold, wet New Jersey nights, my eyes scour the asphalt edges, searching for a pale smudge, a still silhouette, a white dress floating in the dark, because I know she's there, somewhere, hungry, waiting, and the devil's highway never lets go of those who've seen her face. The first shriek tore through B-Wing just as I finalized the night shift logs. It wasn't a normal cry of pain, it was an animalistic tearing of the throat, too high-pitched to be human, ending in a wet gurgle that froze my blood. That's when the emergency lights of the Blackwood Hills Advanced Genomic Lab, Prometheus, buried deep in the woods of rural Tennessee, began pulsing a sinister red, casting deformed, dancing shadows on the polished steel walls. My name is Edward. I'm a Level 3 tech, and sitting at my station in the secondary monitoring room, I knew Dr. Shaw's nightmare, Project Phoenix, had finally broken its cage. The project was revolutionary on paper. High-risk genetic manipulation to create ultra-rapid regenerative tissues. Military applications, of course, always military. The star was strain Chimera, a modified virus carrying synthetic DNA sequences designed to rewrite damaged cells in record time. Tests on lab rats showed near-instantaneous regeneration of severe injuries. But there were side effects, strange ones. Aggressive behavior, anomalous tissue growth in undamaged areas. Dr. Shaw, a man whose ambition was only surpassed by his arrogance, called them course corrections. He and his core team, Dr. Anna Reynolds, the reluctant bioethicist, and Marcus, the unstable viral engineering genius, worked in absolute secrecy on Sigma level, the fortified subbasement. I monitored environmental and security systems from above, a mere spectator in the god game they thought they were playing. The shriek came from Sigma level. My fingers flew over the keyboards, trying to access the cameras. Screen after screen showed only static or images distorted by the same pulsing red. The only camera partially working was Sigma's main corridor feed. It showed a large, dark, shapeless mass dragging itself across the floor, leaving a viscous, gleaming trail under the strobing lights. Something that might once have worn a lab coat. My stomach churned. Protocol dictated locking it down, sealing the level, initiating chemical purge. My hands shook over the controls. Locking it down meant condemning anyone still inside. Anna, Marcus, even the arrogant Shaw. Before I could decide, a different alarm screamed, high-pitched, insistent. Primary containment breached. Sigma level compromised. Damn, they were out. The massive security doors separating the levels began grinding shut automatically. From my post, I could see through the reinforced glass into the elevator access corridor. That's when I saw Marcus. He sprinted towards the Sigma elevator door, face a mask of pure terror, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. He was covered in blood, dark, almost black, seemingly not his own. He hammered frantically on the button, looking back into the red-tinged darkness leading to Sigma. Something yanked him. Not a hand, but something long, sinuous, glistening like exposed muscle, that wrapped around his ankle with supernatural speed. Marcus was snatched off the floor like a rag doll, disappearing into the pulsing gloom. His scream was cut short by a horrible sound, a wet crunch followed by abrupt, heavy silence. The air inside the monitoring room turned icy, despite the climate systems being offline. The smell began seeping through the sealed vents. A sweet, nauseating odor, like spoiled meat mixed with acidic chemicals and something else, something terribly organic, of wet, rotten earth. Fear, a living, icy animal, coiled in my chest. The security doors for my level were sealed, but for how long? What the hell had Chimera done to the people down there? It was Anna who appeared next. She emerged from the service corridor, the one leading to the main ventilation shafts. Her lab coat was torn, her face paper white, but her eyes burned with a strange, febrile light. She walked with an unnatural stiffness, as if relearning how to use her legs. I slammed my hand against the reinforced glass separating the monitoring room from the corridor. She turned slowly. There was no recognition in her gaze, only a vacant, predatory curiosity. Then I saw her arm, or what remained of it. Below the elbow, there was no hand, no forearm. In its place, a grotesque appendage pulsed, a mass of raw, glistening red flesh studded with bony spurs that lengthened and retracted like primitive claws. The flesh itself seemed to writhe, reconfigure before my eyes. She raised that horror and scraped the glass with a spur. It didn't scratch, but the sound, a high-pitched, wet screech, echoed in my soul. Chimera wasn't just killing. It was rebuilding. Panic consumed me. I shut down all non-essential systems, plunging the room into semi-darkness, lit only by the blood-red pulse of the emergency lights. My only link to the outside world was the emergency comm terminal, but the lines were dead. Jammers? Or had Chimera already reached the main systems? Then the sounds began. Metallic scratching from the ventilation ducts above the drop ceiling. A wet, heavy dragging sound outside the room's blast door. Wheezing, ragged breaths that sounded nothing human, echoing down the corridor. And moans. Low, continuous moans, full of an agony that transcended the physical, seeming to emanate from the very walls. Step by step, the horror encroached. I saw shadows moving wrong, too fast, too fluid, on the sporadically functioning cameras. Shapes contorting at the edge of vision, melting into darkness. The smell worsened, becoming suffocating even within the sealed room. A stench of open viscera and burnt sugar. I remembered the reports I processed, Dr. Shaw's marginal notes, uncontrolled tissue growth in response to perceived threat stimulus, accelerated metabolism requiring massive caloric intake. Chimera didn't just regenerate, it adapted. It reshaped the host into whatever it most feared, or whatever best served survival and consumption. The power flickered. The emergency lights died for an instant that lasted an eternity. In the absolute blackness, I heard something heavy thud onto the corridor floor right outside my door. A noise of something large, wet, dragging itself. And a new sound. A wet clicking, repetitive, like bones being broken and remade in rapid succession. When the red lights returned, flickering weakly, I saw through the small reinforced viewport in the door. Dr. Shaw was there. Or what was left of him. He was unrecognizable. His body had swollen, distended, skin stretched to the point of splitting, revealing dark, pulsing muscle tissue beneath. His legs were misshapen pillars ending in feet that resembled raw meat hooves. One arm was transformed into something resembling a monstrous lobster claw, huge and bony. The other arm was gone. In its place, short, fat tentacles writhed in the air like blind worms. But the worst was the face, or the lack of one. Where eyes, nose, and mouth should be, there was only a smooth, taut expanse of skin, featureless. In the center, a single vertical slit, wet and pulsing like a primitive mouth, opened and closed slowly, emitting that continuous hoarse moan. He or it turned slowly, its face sweeping the corridor. Stopped. Seemed to fixate on my viewport. On me. The slit pulsed faster. It began dragging itself towards me, the claw rasping against the steel with a noise that set my teeth on edge. That was the breaking point. The monitoring room was a tomb waiting to be opened. There was one way out, a narrow service tunnel leading to the external garage, used for cable maintenance. It was a massive risk, but staying meant certain death, or something infinitely worse. I stuffed my pockets with what I could, a flashlight, a tiny fire extinguisher, a grim joke, a master maintenance key. I disengaged the final protocols, keeping the blast door locked from the inside, my hand shaking so badly I almost failed. The heavy door slid open with a muffled hydraulic hiss. The smell hit me like a physical blow, nearly knocking me down. Sweet, putrid, chemical. The corridor was dark, only a distant emergency red light painting the walls in blood. And empty. For now. I ran, not towards the main garage, but towards the service tunnel access, a small, rusted metal door at the end of a side passage. Sounds pursued me. The wet dragging seemed to come from multiple directions now. Moans echoed through the ducts. Something heavy crashed in an adjacent room, making the floor tremble. I reached the door, my sweaty hands fumbling with the master key. The mechanism was stiff. I turned it with desperate force. With a groan, the door gave way. The tunnel was narrow, low, full of dust and wires. I plunged into it, pulling the door shut behind me, not caring about the noise. There was no way to lock it from inside. It was run or die. The air in the tunnel was stale, stagnant, but mercifully free of that horrific smell. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing cobwebs and debris. I ran hunched over, my head scraping the low ceiling. Every sound behind me was the horror catching up. Every breath I took echoed like a bell. It felt like an eternity, but I saw the weak light at the end, the access door to the garage. I pushed with all my weight. It opened with a shriek that seemed to tear the night. The cool, damp air of the pre-dawn was the most wonderful scent I'd ever known. The semi-abandoned garage lay before me, a few military Humvees and service vehicles parked inside. The large roll-up door leading outside was closed, but there was a manual control beside it. I was so close. I turned to run for the control when something exploded from the tunnel door behind me. Not Dr. Shaw. Something smaller, faster. It had been George, one of the security guards, a big, quiet guy. Now, he scuttled across the concrete floor like an ungainly insect. His legs were atrophied, bent at wrong angles. His arms, however, were grotesquely elongated, hands transformed into bony, razor-sharp claws. His face was stretched, jaw unhinged, teeth bared in a permanent rictus. He let out a high-pitched shriek, a mixture of pain and hunger, and launched himself at me with terrifying speed. I didn't think. I reacted. The tiny fire extinguisher was in my hand. I pulled the pin and squeezed the trigger, blasting a cloud of white CO2 into the face of the creature that had been George. It shrieked, blinded and disoriented, claws scraping the cement near my feet. It bought me the seconds I needed. I sprinted to the door control, yanked the emergency release lever down with all my remaining strength. With a deafening metallic screech, the large roll-up door began to ascend, revealing the damp night and the dark woods beyond the perimeter fence. I didn't look back. I ran across the garage, ducking under the still-rising door. Wet grass under my feet. Open air. I ran like a madman towards the fence. No plan, just the blind instinct to escape. I heard horrific shrieks coming from the complex behind me, no longer human, and the distant sound of shattering glass and tearing metal. I didn't stop. I scaled the fence like a cornered animal, the concertina wire tearing my clothes and my skin, but I barely felt it. I dropped to the other side and kept running, blind with panic, crashing into the dense woods surrounding the property. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I collapsed into a small creek, the icy water washing away sweat and blood. I lay there, trembling uncontrollably, listening only to the water and the frantic drumming of my own heart. Dawn was starting to lighten the horizon. Was I free? Maybe. But as I looked at the scratches on my arm, the cuts from the wire, an insidious question began gnawing at my mind. Chimera was a virus. Highly contagious, according to the protocols I'd helped draft. Exposure inside that hell was inevitable. The regeneration I'd witnessed, it could start small, invisible. How many minutes, hours, or days did I have before I felt a strange itch, a bone-deep ache, before my own tissues began to rebel, to rebuild themselves according to Chimera's twisted logic? I looked at the trees around me, at the brightening sky. The beauty of the world seemed a fragile illusion. The real horror wasn't locked in the Prometheus lab anymore. It was inside me, and it was hungry.